Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on exploring possibilities with design thinking. I am Professor John Del Rosario, the Managing Director of AGDR Performance Quality Management Consultancy, and I'm also an individual member of the People Management Association of the Philippines. I'll be your webinar host for this afternoon. So today we're going to talk about design thinking. Okay, so what is design thinking? Okay, so if we look at the definition, okay, it's a model of process thinking that converts user needs and preferences into product, service, or process improvements or innovations that satisfy user needs and preferences. Now, that's actually a mouthful. So let's look at the definition and dissect it one by one. Okay. First, it's a model of process thinking. So it's a way of thinking that looks into processes. So that means the way you use design thinking should be in terms of step-by-step processes. So there's a systematic way of looking at design thinking. Okay, and then the focus of design thinking is on converting the user needs and preferences. Okay, so in other words, it starts with knowing the needs and preferences of your users. This is a very logical approach in the sense that, of course, if you want to come up with innovations, with improvements that truly impact the users, you have to start with them. Starting with them in terms of knowing what they want, what they need, and coming up with improvements, coming up with innovations based on responding to those needs and preferences. Naturally, okay, as you go through design thinking and actually implement those improvements and processes and innovations, we can expect that this indeed will satisfy the needs and the preferences of users. So basically, it's going around the cycle in the sense that you start with the user needs, you start with with their preferences, and you also end up satisfying their needs and preferences. So there are two quality management tools and methods that come to mind when we speak of design thinking. And these are QFD and PDCA. So QFD is quality function deployment. Okay? So when we speak of quality function deployment, the idea is you look at the needs of your consumers, of your customers. Okay, you directly ask them, okay, what their experiences are as far as the use of products, use of services, and you convert these user needs and preferences into technical specifications, technical requirements. So in other words, you start what the needs are, what the preferences are of your customers, and to be able to create, to produce the products and services that they need. Okay, these needs, these preferences have to be converted into technical specifications so that your people involved in production, involved in engineering, can actually convert them into useful products and services. Somehow, it's similar to design thinking. Another process thinking is PCA. It's popularized by W. Edwards Deming. It stands for plan, do, check, and act. Okay? So it's a very systematic process. You start with the idea, that's the planning part, okay? What you want to do, what you intend to do, and then moving on to actually implementing it with the do step, okay? Uh, Focusing on how you can actually operationalize what you plan to do, what you set to do. Then eventually, as you implement this, you monitor how it's being used, how it's impacting your customers, how it's impacting the users. So that's the check part, the checking part, and try to be alerted with the errors, with the mistakes. Okay, so then you make revisions. Okay, so that you can correct whatever mistakes, whatever errors there are. Okay, and then move into acting on it. That's the key part. Okay, so you have to incorporate these revisions to be able to improve the process. So somehow, these two quality management tools, QFD and PDCA, are similar to design thinking. So why get into design thinking? Because it's a process. Okay, it's a process that you have to go through. You start with empathizing. Okay, what you can see there from the monitor, it's about empathizing, meaning starting with the needs and preferences of your customers. you try to put your situation, their situation, use their own perspective in terms of what they want, what they need from your product, your services. So that's the empathize part. Then, given what you've gathered from your customers, from your users, you define what you set out to do, what you need to do to be able to satisfy those needs and preferences. So that's the define part. Then you come up with ideas that respond to these needs, these preferences. That's where you start thinking of products, services, or even processes, innovations, improvements that could satisfy the needs and preferences of your users, of your customers. Okay? Then to make this a reality, to see if it's going to really work or not, then you have to create prototype. Okay? So that's when you create models, you create simulation of how you're going to be providing the service, okay, to be able to see how it actually works. Okay? Then you move into the testing part, which is similar to pilot testing, field testing, to be able to see how users, how customers, how your target market is actually using the product. Okay, I just included here the step of implementation because eventually, okay, to be able to know all these things, okay, to be able to see if it really works, then you have to implement whatever you set out to do. Okay, so why get into design thinking? Why bother with design thinking? Okay, there are several reasons we can cite here. First, of course, definitely using design thinking will help you satisfy uh, your product users, your service users, and your process users. It actually happens that way, in the sense that you start with identifying what they want, what they need, and then everything that you do afterwards will focus on that, satisfying those needs, satisfying those preferences. So it's only logical to think that eventually this will lead to satisfying their needs eventually. Okay. And of course, now with design thinking, you can have a systematic approach, okay, in terms of introducing improvements, innovations in the workplace, in your organization. Okay. Design thinking can start with individual thinking, but it can also be expanded to the entire work unit or maybe the entire organization. However, which way, it still provides you with a systematic way of how you're supposed to solve problems, how you're supposed to make decisions, how you're supposed to come up with action plans, so on and so forth. Okay, and there's a clear path, okay, on how you're supposed to implement these improvements, these innovations. It's laid out for you. There's a blueprint that you can follow, okay, with design thinking. Okay, and then well, there's a less chance or less risk of failure somehow. Okay, although the situation is not perfect, of course, but there's a better chance for you of succeeding because you already thought about everything from start to finish. Okay, you start with what your users need, okay, what they want. Okay, then all throughout the process, you keep on thinking, you keep on going back to this needs and preferences of your users. So somehow you have a better chance of coming up with products, with services, with processes that truly satisfy the needs of your users. Okay. Then, well, for the company, for the business, it's more cost efficient, more cost effective because you don't really have to pull out your products from the market because you know that your products, your services, your processes are actually responding to this needs of your customers, of your users. Okay, so somehow that's how we can use design thinking in the workplace. Maybe now we can field questions from the audience. If there are things that you want to clarify, we can now ask. You can now ask these questions, and we can take a look at them. The design thinking is a way of thinking not only for individuals, but if this process can be institutionalized. It can also be a way of thinking of the entire work unit or even the entire organization. So in other words, you can have people working on the same page because the way they think is almost the same. So it really benefits the work unit, your team, even the entire organization. So it's not only intended for individuals. Okay? So the idea there is to systematize, to have a systematic approach to the way problems are thought out, the way decisions are made, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's have those questions. Okay, so if there are no more questions, we can now move on to the next part of the webinar. And I want to invite you to our uh, seminar, to our training on May 6th and 7th. It's going to be a 2-day workshop on design thinking, okay, on how to apply design thinking in what you do every day in your business, in your organization. So basically, we can see the application of design thinking in this particular seminar on solving problems, okay, on making decisions, on action planning, even project implementation, even doing the assessment, the evaluation part. Okay, so it provides a walkthrough of the entire process of design thinking from empathizing until testing. Okay? So the seminar is going to be so heavy on workshops wherein we go through the process and at the end of the 2-day program, you're going to come up with an innovation or an improvement in your workplace using design thinking. So that's the essence of the seminar. So these are the learning outcomes that we're going to accomplish during those 2 days. We want to describe the concepts, principles, processes, and tools of design thinking. So basically an introductory on design thinking, on using design thinking, and then explain how design thinking is applied in the workplace. I think that's the most important aspect of the seminar, wherein we look at design thinking as a process, but then again, we also look at how it is applied to what you do in the workplace. And finally, we want to apply design thinking to actual workplace improvements and innovations. As I mentioned earlier, that's the essence of the seminar. That at the end of the 2 days, you have to come up with improvements and innovations, actual improvements, innovations in your workplace. Okay? So these are the topics that are going to be covered for those 2 days. Okay? So if you will notice from the outline, from the listing of topics here, so heavy on the workshops. Okay, so for the 5 steps in design thinking, there will be individual workshops. So we have to go through that. It's a walkthrough, and then eventually we're going to have some presentation of these ideas, of these improvements, of these innovations, and then we're going to critique them, and eventually try to see if we are able to successfully apply design thinking in what we do in the workplace. So that's the coverage of the 2-day seminar on May 6th and 7th here at the PMAP Center. So hope to see you there.